welcome to the Art of Being Human. I'm going to start off this segment by reciting a poem. I'm not going to recite the whole thing, but most of it. And it comes from, if you remember the Serenity Prayer, the one that says, Lord, let me know what I can change and let me know what I can't change and let me have the wisdom to know the difference. Well, this is kind of based upon that. So I'm just calling it the New Serenity Prayer. It was written by a priest, I believe he's a priest, Father James Martin, and I'm not doing the whole thing, but almost the whole thing, and this is what he says, and it's a takeoff of the Serenity Prayer. It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, which is pretty much everyone, since I'm clearly not you, God. And while you're at it, God, please give me the courage to change what I need to change about myself, which is frankly a lot, since once again, I'm not you, which means I'm not perfect. It's better for me to focus on changing myself than to worry about changing other people who I cannot change anyway. Finally, give me the wisdom to just shut up when I think I clearly am smarter than everyone else in the room, that no one knows what they're talking about except me, or that I alone have all the answers. Basically, God, grant me the wisdom to remember that I'm not you. Now, the reason I include the poem is the fact that we can't change people if they don't want to be changed. And part of the problem in our building human relationships and having healthy relationships is that we have the tendency to want to change people. You do what I want you to do, you'll be better off. Or you do what I want you to do and you'll serve my needs better. Or you'll be a better person. Or you'll be happier. Now, there is a time, when we do need to give advice, but to really try to focus on changing all the people we know, that's usually a futile effort, and it just doesn't help very much. It doesn't help them, and it doesn't help you, because their lives are controlled by things that happen to them. Your life is controlled by things that happen to you. And so people will change and people will grow, but not because they're forced to, unless circumstances force it, in which they're changing in order to accommodate their change in circumstances. But for us to just willy-nilly think that this person would be better off if, and we do it all the time with people, and we really shouldn't. We have to let people be who they are. And I've often said, if we let people be who they are and not try to change them, they will more or less grow more to be like what we are, because unknowing to them, they're using us as role models, even though they don't realize it. Who are the people that you like to be with? Who are the people that you'd like to count as your friends? People who just accept you as you are. And people who aren't always trying to tell you what to do. People who are not always trying to make decisions for you. People who are not lecturing you about your behavior. So therefore, they like to be, and we all like to be, with people who accept us as we are. And so we have to remember that we cannot willfully change people. And the idea is we need to allow people to be who they are and enjoy them as they are and celebrate the differences. Life is not about you're this way and I'm that way, so therefore I don't like you because you're not like me. I'm not on a crusade to make everybody like me. No one should be on a crusade to make everybody like them. So we have to enjoy each other and be creative and be able to understand that they have the right to be who they are. We have the right to be who we are. I'm not going to change them. I'm not trying to control something. I'm not trying to make a person to be what I am. We have in our society the tendency to think that if people aren't like us, then somehow they're not worthy to be friends, or we should be afraid of them. And that's just not the case. I can let people be who they are. I can work with them. I can enjoy their company. We can be friends, and they don't have to be like me. And so we need to get off this idea that we have to make people as we are, and if they're not the same as we are, then somehow they're lacking something, or they can't be friends with us, or we can't be friends with them. You know, it just doesn't make any sense that we would live our lives trying to reconstruct another person. And now there are times when we border on it. If a person's in for therapy because they're having emotional problems, naturally the therapist is going to be working with them and changing them, but they're not changing them because they want them to be a certain way. They're trying to help alleviate their anxiety so they can grow to be what they should be and not live in a state of anxiety. So we have to consider, what is my role in society? Well, I believe God puts us in society for a certain purpose. And so therefore we fulfill that purpose. But we don't fulfill that purpose by telling a person, you can't be like you have to be like me. It doesn't work that way. So people people base their lives on what happens to them, and they're controlled by the drama that is within them and within their lives. And we tend to believe what our emotions tell us, because we're not so intellectual that we have a handle on it. If we are reacting emotionally to drama that is in our lives, then we need to find out, why is it disturbing us so much? And if it is disturbing us so much, what's the worst thing that can happen? And if it did happen, will that change my life significantly? Will I be wishing that I was somewhere else, or wishing I was doing something else, or whatever? You see, things just happen. We work with them. Now, there are people are controlled by the things that happen around them. And so here are some things, 3 things, that you can remember about your own personal situation. When you don't have all the answers and you don't have all the facts, what we tend to do is to make assumptions. How do we know an assumption is real? A lot of times we don't know that an assumption is real, but we believe the assumptions are true, and so we behave, and our emotions are based upon those assumptions that we think are true. We tend to believe what our emotions tell us. And I think we need to take stock of the fact that maybe our assumptions aren't really true. Maybe they're a product of our own emotions. We hear about things happen to us, and then we have the assumption that we know what's going on, or this happened and that's caused this and that's caused that, and maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe it doesn't happen like that. So as you are believing certain things because of things that happen to you, problems that you have, you need to start thinking of, is there another explanation? Is there a way I can function without having anxiety? Because maybe my assumptions about something aren't wrong. They may be right, but they may also not be right. You know, babies are not born with assumptions. Babies are born, and as they are growing up, they find out what's safe for them and what's not safe for them. And then we operate according to what is safe for us, and we grow into that. We grow into a society in which things are accepted and things are not accepted, and we grow to live within the parameters of the societies. But children, they just don't have assumptions. They're born and they are who they are. There is this marvelous thing I see on television every so often, 2 toddlers. One of them is a person of color, and the other child is Caucasian. And they look at each other. They're probably 16, 17 months old. They're real young. They are walking, however. They're not so small that they're not walking. And they see each other, and they just can't wait to be in each other's arms. So they run to each other and they just hug each other. It doesn't matter to them that one of them is a person of color and one is Caucasian. They don't even think of it. And I read this cute little story. I think they were 6 years old. One of them was dark-skinned and one of them was light-skinned, and they're in the same class, and they really like each other and they're friends with each other. And there's nothing in terms of, well, you're this color and I'm that color, we can't get along. There's none of that nonsense. And they had a joke they wanted to play on their first grade teacher. And they came up and they thought if they held hands, the teacher might not know who was who because they looked a lot alike, except for the color. They looked a lot alike. And then, now, this is from their perspective. They looked a lot alike. They're about the same size. They like each other. They like the same things. We can hold hands, and our teacher won't know which is which. And they thought that was quite a cute little joke, and it was a cute little joke. But what they didn't think about, and what they never thought about, because it never entered their minds, that one of them is dark skin and the other is light skin. So, you know, it would be real easy for a teacher to tell them apart, but they have no sense in terms of color and what it means. All they know is that they like each other, they like the same things, they're friends. Now, the assumptions just aren't there. It's pure, it's innocent, it's delightful to see. We need to, when we get assumptions, to check them out. We need to learn the truth in order to have a good life. Now, remember, the Bible says the truth will set you free. So when you are thinking about a certain thing, you need to get to the truth of it before you make an assumption. If something happens, I'm going to think the worst. But but that is an assumption by itself. If I say that something happens to me or something happens to a family member, my mind is going to go haywire, and I'm going to think this is the worst that can happen. And I stretch that reality to what is most difficult and what is the most worst thing I can think of. And we all do it. It's not just my problem. It's everybody's problem. So sit down and think. Maybe it's not as bad as you think. Let's find the truth of the matter. Then, if we're going to make an assumption or an expectation, it may not be a negative expectation that we make. We have expectations, we have beliefs. We tend to believe what our emotions are telling us because we're not as intellectual as we think we are. And so that can lead to a lot of angst, it can lead to a lot of anxiety, a lot of drama in your life. Sit down and find out what the truth really is. You may have to spend some time doing it, but it may not be as bad as you think. Or in some cases, it might even be worse than you think. But you have to find out what the truth is before you just assume that your assumption is correct. You know, I was teaching a couple of examples. I was teaching a student who was going to get a GED. I wanted to help her in the process. I was a teacher. She asked me to help her in the process, so I started to teach her. She started banging on my door one night, and she was terrified, because she had read in the newspaper, and it was all over the newspapers, that one of the Scandinavian countries had an atom smasher, and they were going to do this experiment, and they were going to smash an atom. And the danger was, and it was a real danger, that if they couldn't contain it, if they couldn't contain the atom after it was smashed and it was, you know, just disassembled from its electrons and protons and atom, then it could cause a tremendous explosion. And if for some reason it leaked out, then it could destabilize a lot of other atoms, and atoms would destabilize other atoms, and on it would go. You could get powerful explosions. And it was thought by some people that even the world could blow up. Well, she read this, and then she came to me, and she was Christian, and I was teaching her, and I said, you know what? I think you can put your worries to rest, because the Bible talks about what's going to end, how the earth is going to end. The Bible talks about it. And we can assume that it's going to end the way God says it's going to end and not worry about it, because it's already in the Scripture. God has told us what He wants us to know, and we can just trust in that. A lot of things that you can get worried about can be solved just by trusting. You trust that things are going to happen the way they're supposed to. Now, it doesn't require your effort to make it happen, it requires that you trust that God's going to make happen what should happen. And I got her to calm down with that. And so she did calm down with that. Now the day came when they did the experiment, and scientists were concerned about what could happen, but I don't know how many of them were in a dead panic. She was in a panic. And nothing happened. Nothing happened, life went on, and everything was all right, you know, and so it didn't bother her after that. So what you have to decide to do is to find out the truth of a matter, and then you can make an assumption, and then you can decide, is it worth worrying about, or is it something that's going to pass? Now, in another example, another student came to me, and she was concerned as well, because every so often the planets are in alignment. All of them. And on those rare occasions, it doesn't happen often, when all of the planets are in alignment throughout our solar system, that the combined magnetic powers of them will cause disruptions on the Earth. It could cause the power grid to go out. It could cause all kinds of things to happen. And so she was concerned about that. And I says, well, let's wait and see what happens. And lo and behold, nothing happened. Everything worked the way that it was supposed to. Another third example was the fact that when we turned to the year 2000, that was a jump from 1900s to the year 2000. And I can remember that a lot of people were very, very concerned. Professionals were very concerned. Computer experts were very concerned that somehow the power grid would fail because the computers would not be able to register 2000s and the years beyond 2000. It would revert to 1000. And I know that I was working at a telecommunications center at the time, and they were working on the computers to get them to accept 2000 and beyond, and not revert back to 1000, in which case everything would fail, because in the year 1000 there was no modern electronics at all. And that was a concern of a lot of people. I can remember, because I was an adult working in telecommunications at the time, that a lot of hotels were going to have 2,000-year parties, and they were charging exorbitant prices for people to come and have parties, and then they would all be together at the moment that the year 2000 came in at midnight. And then, of course, people started worrying about the power grid and all kinds of things that would happen with the power grid. And so a lot of people canceled out their party plans, and they decided to stay home. And the hotels drastically reduced the prices to keep the party going and to have people coming in for their 2000. But a lot of people just stayed home. They wanted to protect their homes in case they got off the power grid, in case everything failed, in case there were no electronics. And I can remember computer specialists coming into our offices and working with the computers to prepare them for that switch from the 1900s into the 2000 year. And so I stayed home along with a lot of other people. I don't socialize that much anyway. And I stayed home. The year 2000 came in. There wasn't a disruption at all. Everything proceeded normally. Nothing happened. So people were getting upset and distressed about what might happen. This is what anticipatory fear is. Anticipatory fear is when you anticipate the worst, and it's usually based on a real thing. The real thing is the planets are going to be in alignment, or the computers might possibly fail because of a change in year, or there might be an explosion due to an atom smasher. Those things are real. Those things could happen, but it doesn't mean they will happen. So we get anticipatory fear when we know, when there's a real thing going on, when you had the lab tests and they wonder if you really do have cancer, and all of these things go on and they're for real. It's not like you're making something up, like you're being bombarded by neutrons from outer space or something like that. I did work with a lady who felt that she was being photographed by demons and demonic spirits in an upper level somewhere. I mean, that's irrealistic, probably irrealistic, but for her it was very real. For her, her fake beliefs, due to her illness, she was mentally ill, caused her a lot of angst. But anticipatory fear is when there is something and it's very real. You know, you go to the dentist and you're afraid of the dentist, so it's very real. The fear is very real. It's anticipatory in that you don't know what's going to happen, but you fear the worst. So anticipatory fear is knowing something's going to happen, not knowing what the result of it, but it's a real situation nonetheless. But you don't know what's going to happen as a result of it, and then you fear about it. You know, anticipatory fear can be put to rest if you understand that your anticipation of what's going to happen is going to be a lot worse than what the actual event is going to be. You know, when a person, and I've been asked this before, supposing you're afraid to go to a dentist or a doctor, when are you most afraid? Just before you get there. You're practically walking in the door, or a few days before you start to fear it. And when does that anxiety stop? When you're there. Because now it's no longer an anticipated event. You are actually on the premises, it's actually going on, and you're finding out it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. And all of that anticipation goes away. And then you're in the real event. Now, you may have some real fear for that event, but I liken it to people who go on stage, actors and actresses. I had a good friend of mine who was an actress in New York, and she used to say, when you go on stage, you are so fearful because you might not remember what you're supposed to do. It may not go well, and on and on and on it goes, what you're afraid of. And then you get there and you start doing it, whatever it is. You're playing your solo, you're giving your speech, whatever it is, and the fear goes away. It goes away when it stops being anticipatory and you're in the real event. And you may have some fear for the real event, but it's no longer anticipatory. If it's anticipatory fear, then it's going to go way out of line, you know. I have a little bump in my arm. Oh, it's got to be cancer. I must have cancer. It's bone cancer. It's one of the worst kinds of cancer. It's one of the most painful kinds of cancer. And you build up that fear over and over again, and you take it to its logical and illogical extent, and it becomes way beyond what you would probably ever face naturally. And so when you have that type of anticipatory fear, that's when it's helpful to use the self-talk and say, wait a minute, I'm anticipating this. What's the event going to be? A visit to a doctor, a visit to a lab, or something, a court case? And then you just imagine how awful it's going to be, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And when you're in the situation, it's no longer an anticipated event, it's a real event. So you live your life, and you don't have to anticipate everything. You live your life as it presents itself to you, and then you make your judgments after gaining all the knowledge that you need to make your judgment, and you don't sink into that fear of what's going to happen next. Now, we all have it to a certain degree, but some people have a lot more control of it than others. Some people tend to be a lot more fearful than others. I've had students that I've taught that were very anxiety prone. And I can remember talking to one student and say, why are you so afraid? Why is it that you go through this day after day after day? I don't know, I just do. You know, I don't know what it is, but I do every day, and I'm used to it now. So I think part of this may possibly be genetic. Part of people being anxious may possibly be genetic in the sense that they're not a calm person to begin with. Well, I see we're running out of time. It went faster than I thought it was going to. So get your information. Understand when you're in anticipatory anxiety. Understand that it's going to take you far afield and it's going to be a lot worse than what the event actually is. Make your assumptions, but don't make your assumptions until after you've had a chance to actually look into it and find out some facts so that when you do think about something, you can think about it more realistically. So, and that will help you also in terms of your personal relationships with other people. So I'm going to close it here. We'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.